Where did Paul McCartney die? The Midlands Connection. Information from Memoirs, 4th edition. On page 200 of the Memoirs of Billy Shears, we are told that Paul died at 5 a.m. on Sunday the 11th of September, 1966. He had been involved in a car crash. He was replaced by the session musician William Shepherd. Bobby Fuller's death by inhaling gasoline at 5 p.m. on the 18th of July 1966 is also mentioned on this page. It says that each of them was slain in a car meant to become their crematorium. Presumably the intention was to set both cars on fire in order to destroy any evidence, but, in at least Bobby's case, this didn't happen. Note the numerology. 200 sums to 2, denoting the dualistic nature of their deaths at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. respectively. In the major arcana of a tarot deck, card number 2 is the High Priestess, which is connecting to following, receiving, balance, and hidden knowledge. On page 57 of Memoirs, we are told that the Magical Mystery Tour film and album booklet tells us that Paul died 10 miles north on the DEWSBURY Road. On page 183 of Memoirs, we are told that the cover for Sgt. Pepper has a flower arrangement spelling out "Be at Lezo." Lezo is a street in Masocco, Switzerland. The word means injured in Italian. On the same page, we are told that London is 666 miles from Lezo, and that Staffordshire is 600 miles away from Lezo. Anyone familiar with the geography of Europe knows these mileages are wrong. They are more likely to be the other way around. However, this error made this information stand out to me. Note the numerology. Both 57 and 183 are reducible to 12 and then 3. The number 3 denotes magic and creativity. In the major arcana of a tarot deck, card number 3 is the Empress. She is normally a positive force, except when reversed. Then she can show someone who is vulnerable and trapped. Card number 12 is the Hanged Man. He is connected to intuitive wisdom, often found as a result of a self-sacrificing act. Which DEWSBURY Road? Staffordshire has been used as a somewhat vague mileage marker on page 183 of Memoirs. Why include this location if it's not significant? Paul's death site could be located in Staffordshire and also be 666 miles from Lezo. If so, this means that occulted messaging was encoded into the chosen death site. Paul's killers were symbolically willing him to be fatally injured 666 miles away from a place with that exact meaning. There are currently 11 DEWSBURY roads in England. A lot of them are understandably in Yorkshire, near the town of DEWSBURY. 10 of them are either residential or commercial areas. A few are major artery roads with much through traffic. None of these roads are good locations to commit a crime without witnesses. The 11th DEWSBURY road on the list is the one in Staffordshire. It is located in the town of FENTON, near Stoke-on-Trent. Crossroads in FENTON. In 1966, DEWSBURY Road, Fenton, Staffordshire, was part of a crossroads that led to a pottery and brickworks. It replaced Northwood Farm, which was situated on the same spot as the pottery. Adjacent is a 1966 map of Stoke-on-Trent, which shows the crossroads of the A50, DEWSBURY Road and Albert Road, which is now Manor Street. Crossroads are frequently used in magical rituals, as they metaphorically mark a crossing point between the worlds of the living and the dead. Present-day Fenton. The crossroad junction has been modified to install a power substation, but we can still see that DEWSBURY Road, which is now an industrial estate, and what is left of the A50 still intersect. The former crossroad is shown on the map by the dotted lines. Was Paul driving from London to Liverpool? In the first 2 weeks of September 1966, the Beatles were given a much-needed post-USA tour break. John Lennon went off to film How I Won the War in West Germany and Spain during this time. The other Beatles simply went on holiday. Paul was living in St John's Wood, London, at the time that he died. Maybe he decided to visit his old home of Liverpool. If he did make this journey of over 200 miles, how would he get there undetected? Considering his staggering level of fame, he could try going in disguise. Apparently he did this all the time, but he wasn't very successful. If he really did want to get from one end of England to the other, without being noticed and mobbed by the press and screaming fans, he was better off going under the cover of darkness. That either meant driving all night or getting up very early and driving before dawn. This might explain why Paul was travelling around at 5 a.m. on a Sunday. Paul might have felt he had no other options but to make the 3.5-hour drive to Liverpool. Equally, he might have felt it was an excellent opportunity to really test out his Aston Martin DB6. Paul's theoretical route from London to Liverpool. So, let's say hypothetically, Paul does make this long drive from London to Liverpool. What route does he take? After consulting many old road maps of Britain, I realised that, in 1966, if Paul wanted to drive from London to Liverpool, in order to see friends and family, he probably would have taken one of three routes. Route 1, take the A6 towards Leicester, and then the A50 through Staffordshire and head towards Liverpool. Route 2, take the A5 towards Stafford and change for the A34, then take the A50 near Stoke-on-Trent and head towards Liverpool. Route 3, take the M1 to the junction near Rugby and then take the A5. Near Stafford, take the M6 towards Warrington, then take the A50 towards Liverpool. Routes 1 and 2 were both simple and probably well known to Paul. Route 3 was a bit of a risk, as both the M1 and M6 were so new that they were still being built in 1966. They were open to the public in stages. The potential for getting lost on this route is quite high, especially in the dark, because these new motorways had no lighting. Regardless of which route Paul took, he would eventually end up on the A50, probably in Staffordshire. If someone wanted to cause him to crash, diverting and intercepting his car in Staffordshire would be the best place to do so. A 1956 map of Staffordshire and Cheshire. This map shows the last third of Paul's theoretical journey. Here we can see routes 1 and 2 as discussed before. These older routes were probably the ones that Paul knew best. The pink circle, at the bottom, highlights the A34. The purple circles show the A50 route towards Liverpool. The red arrow shows where the A34 and A50 merged. A 1966 map of Staffordshire and Cheshire. Again, I have shown just the last third of Paul's theoretical journey to Liverpool. This map includes a newly built section of the M6, which was missing from the previous 1956 map. It runs parallel to the A50. Even if Paul was on the M6, he could have easily been diverted onto the A50. The A50 is highlighted in red circles. The A34 is highlighted with yellow circles. The M6 is highlighted with blue circles. Liverpool is highlighted with a white box in the top left-hand corner. British motoring in the 1960s. It is very easy to make judgments about Paul's car crash based on contemporary standards. However, I think it's important to discuss this topic with a view to the times in which it took place. In the 1960s, the new motorways in Britain were notoriously dangerous. They were open to the public while they were still being built. They had no hard shoulders, just soft verges, no crash barriers, no streetlights, and no speed limit. The first section of the M6, the Preston Bypass, broke almost immediately after it was open to the public because it wasn't waterproof. Permeated water froze inside the road surface, which then broke the road under the weight and pressure of passing cars. Even what we now regard as standard road signs for navigation were only just being introduced in 1965. Before this time, British motorists had to make use of non-standardised signage and largely relied on reading a map. Fortunately for the British government, fewer people owned cars at the time. Otherwise, there would have been many more road accidents than there were. The proportion of motorists experiencing a crash was still high, though, so Paul's crash would have been seen as tragic but commonplace if the public had learnt about it. Here is a photo of the A50, known locally in Fenton as Victoria Road, taken in 1965, 1 year before Paul's death. The A50 was a major trunk road, connecting the north and south of England in 1965, yet it was only a single carriageway with a soft verge. The stretch of road seen in this photo is approximately a quarter of a mile south of the crossroads at Dewsbury Road in Fenton, Staffordshire. History of Fenton Vivian. The area that Dewsbury Road in Fenton leads to was originally called Fenton Vivian. This is why there is a nearby street called Vivian Street. It was named after the estate's 13th century owner, Vivian Stanston, a name which is quite close to William Shepherd's Bonzo character, Vivian Stansell. According to Memoirs, the name Vivian encodes the number 66 in Roman numerals. There was also a pub called the Angel Inn, situated on Vivian Street. It was frequented by the fascist Oswald Mosley, who used it as an operational base. Mosley was known personally by MI5 spy master Maxwell Knight. Fenton also has a William Street, so William's real name gets a mention too. If Fenton really is the scene of Paul's sacrifice, having these names as landmarks would be regarded as divine signs and omens for the conspirators' plot. Minerva Works in Fenton. Fenton was also home to Minerva Works and Minerva Road. Minerva is the Roman goddess, symbolized by the owl at Bohemian Grove, equivalent to the Egyptian goddess Neith, mother of the sun god Ra. Minerva Works became the Crown Works during World War II and produced goods for the British Navy. Its name reverted back after the war. Generally, anything named or belonging to the Crown relates to the City of London and the Rothschilds' banking dynasty. One of the previous potters that worked at Minerva Works was William Bacchus. Bacchus was the Roman name for the Greek god Dionysus and is equivalent to the Egyptian god Osiris. Masons' ironworks were also nearby. Freemasons seem to feature quite a lot in the Beatles psyop and the McCartney conspiracy. Slum clearance in Fenton. Digging through parliamentary documents, I realised that the pottery town of Fenton was one of many due for slum house clearance and development in the 1960s and 70s. I found legislation about the slum clearance that passed through the House of Commons in 1962, with further notifications that the work to level the pits, quarries and spoil heaps had actually just started in 1963. Here is a photo of the huge spoil heap next to the disused Fenton Manor Station, taken in April 1963. This area was next to the crossroads at Dewsbury Road and the A50, which would be to the right-hand side of this railway line. This spoil heap is from both the ceramics and coal mining industries. These heaps used to get so big that they caused avalanches during storms, posing a serious threat to the lives of residents. The cover-up of evidence. Here is another photo of the same spoil heap before it was cleared, taken from the top of the hill in Fenton Park. If this is indeed Paul's death site, the location of Fenton was an excellent choice for the cabal, since the area was to be cleared and redeveloped. If by 1966 the work had already begun to level the spoil heaps, residents who would have been potential witnesses were probably already relocated. Likewise, any incriminating evidence from his murder would have been swept away by the redevelopment of the land, which took many years to complete. Midlands Connections, Birmingham reporter Samuel. On page 163 of Memoirs, we are told that Samuel, a snooping Birmingham reporter, had heard about Paul's death and was threatening to print the story. The two main newspapers for the Birmingham area are the Weekly Birmingham Post and the Daily Birmingham Mail. These are Midlands-based publications. As such, they sometimes cover stories from neighbouring areas like Warwickshire, Worcestershire, and Staffordshire. Alternatively, Samuel could have been a regional reporter for a national newspaper. In this context, describing Samuel as a Birmingham reporter can only be seen as a clue to the scene of Paul's death. In Memoirs on page 181 and in the song lyrics for Lady Madonna, we are told that Wednesday morning papers didn't come. This is a reference for Samuel having not submitted his story about Paul's death. Memoir says he was paid to keep his silence, but perhaps after he was threatened by the Tavistock Institute, he was silenced in a more permanent way. Note the numerology. 163 sums to 10 and then 1. 181 also sums to 10 and then 1. Number 1 denotes beginnings. In the major arcana of a tarot deck, card number 1 is the magician, who symbolizes events and magic set into motion. Card number 10 is the Wheel of Fortune. This fortune could be good or bad, the beginning or ending of a situation. Perhaps this was the end of Samuel as well as Paul. It was certainly the beginning for the magician's son William in the role of Paul. Hand in the fire. On a grisly note, the I'm a Phony videos repeatedly show an image of what appears to be a hand against the inside of a window of a kiln. Perhaps the pottery kilns in Fenton were used to destroy human evidence too. Maybe I'm a Phony is just trying to be provocative by including this image, but we must also consider that if it is genuine, this hand might belong to Paul, the reporter Sam, or anyone else who was part of this plot that was then considered expendable once they had completed their role. Midlands Connections, the Diplomats. Another interesting link to Birmingham is the Diplomats, the Birmingham-based band that William played in under the name of Phil Ackrell. Its members included Denny Lane and Bev Bevan, who are also from Birmingham. Their roadie and occasional vocalist was the Birmingham comedian Bobby Davis, better known by his stage name Jasper Carrot. This means that Jasper probably knew William before he started playing Paul. This might explain his inclusion of jokes about the Beatles, and especially Ringo, not being able to play their instruments as part of his act many years ago. In Memoirs on page 142, William tells us that the Diplomats opened for the Beatles at Plaza Ballroom, Old Hill, an area of Birmingham, on the 5th of July, 1963. It also says that on at least one occasion, the Diplomats and the Beatles shared a dressing room. Note the numerology. 142 sums to 7, denoting spiritual wisdom, mysticism, and success. In a tarot deck, card number 7 of the major arcana is the Chariot. It is connected to travel to new places or progress after a delay. Reversed, it means unpleasant news and bad luck. Alternative theories. Some other PID researchers have pointed towards other Dewsbury roads that they believe are the death site of Paul. Most notably, the Dewsbury Road in northwest London. This is an area I know quite well. I find it hard to believe that MI5 spy master Maxwell Knight would have been so stupid as to kill one of the most famous and beloved people in the world in plain view on a densely populated residential road in Willesden, which is also near Dollars Hill tube station. The potential for witnesses, even at 5 a.m. on a Sunday, would have been too great. There is also a Dewsbury Road in Liverpool, Anfield, very close to both Liverpool FC Stadium and one of Paul's old homes. However, this street is a narrow single-lane, one-way road with very dense terrace housing. The options to quietly kill Paul and clean up the scene here, after crashing his car and causing him a fatal head wound, all without being noticed, seem extraordinarily slim. Other Dewsbury roads around England don't have any known links to the Beatles or to Memoirs, so I am disregarding them for now. I have also considered the theory that 10 miles north on the Dewsbury Road is meant figuratively. Maybe it is a sly reference for the M1. The M1 connects London to Leeds, which is near the town of Dewsbury. Possibly the car crash was 10 miles north of the start of the M1. This does seem a bit far-fetched, though. The M1 could be thought as the London Road or Leeds Road, depending on your driving direction, but not really the Dewsbury Road. Lastly, I am aware that the names of roads change constantly. Likewise, old roads are discarded and new ones built all the time. It could be that the DEWSBURY road that we are looking for is one that no longer exists or has been renamed. Even the DEWSBURY road in Fenton was previously called Northwood Farm Road. Final thoughts. In this presentation, I have put forward a theory that Paul might have died on or near the crossroads of the A50 and DEWSBURY Road in Fenton, Staffordshire, on a journey from London to Liverpool. He may have been directed to drive over an obstacle such as a ramp or a stinger in order to cause his crash. Alternatively, Paul may have been deliberately directed to drive off an unfinished section of road or drugged to impair his driving. I can't prove that Fenton was the site of Paul's death, but I do believe that, at the very least, he died somewhere in Staffordshire. Between the clues from Memoirs and other evidence gathered here, I cannot help but feel drawn towards Staffordshire being the scene of his ritualistic murder. It cannot be a mere coincidence that this whole conspiracy has many connections to the English Midlands. My theory is just that, a theory. I do not know that Paul died in Fenton, and I can never prove it, even if he did. If further evidence comes to light that contradicts my theory, I will modify it accordingly. Here is a selection of the online resources I used to compile this presentation.